I forgot who I was. There was no me, just awareness. I was everything and nothing at the same time. These are real words from people who experienced ego death on psilocybin. Sounds mystical, right? Like their soul left their body and touched another dimension. But neuroscience has a completely different explanation. Your brain has specific systems that hold together the story of you. Your name, your memories, your problems, your image. During ego death, those systems temporarily shut down. The default mode network and related self-model circuits stop firing the way they normally do. The narrator in your head goes silent, and experience is no longer organized around a central character. Two groups look at this phenomenon from opposite ends. Spiritual communities see ego death as cosmic awakening, proof that consciousness exists beyond the physical body. Skeptics dismiss it as just being really high, nothing more than brain chemistry gone haywire. This video bridges that gap. We're breaking down what the ego actually is, what happens in your brain during ego death, why it can heal trauma and depression, and why some people say one night changed their entire life. We're also covering why it can be absolutely terrifying if you're not prepared. If you're curious about how your brain creates your sense of self and what happens when that system breaks down, hit subscribe. We're diving into the neuroscience behind one of the most intense psychological experiences a human can have. So what is the ego? It's not about being cocky or arrogant. The ego is your brain's self-model. Think of it as an always updating internal simulation that tracks your body, your name, your social roles, your past, your future, and what other people think of you. The default mode network is a group of brain regions that becomes active when you think about yourself. It includes the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex. This network lights up when you remember your past, imagine your future, or mentally simulate how others see you. It supports what researchers call narrative identity. That's the ongoing mental monologue of me and my story. But ego functions go beyond the default mode network. The salience network and medial temporal lobes also play a role. They link emotion, memory, and what feels personally important. They help maintain the sense that you are a continuous self moving through time. Thomas Metzinger, a philosopher and neuroscientist, has an idea he calls the ego tunnel. He argues that the self is a virtual model your brain generates. It's not a metaphysical object or a soul. It feels real because your brain doesn't label it as a model. You mistake the simulation for the real thing. Anil Seth, another neuroscientist, frames it similarly in his work on predictive processing. He describes the self as a controlled hallucination. Your brain constantly makes predictions about your body, the world, and social context. It builds a sense of self from those predictions. Whenever your brain needs to act in the world, defend your reputation, or plan your future, it boots up a self-simulation. And you mistake that simulation for who you are. Ego dissolution, also called ego death, is a temporary loss or weakening of the usual boundaries between self and world. Researchers measure it using scales like the Ego Dissolution Inventory and assessments of something called oceanic boundlessness. Robin Carhart Harris and his colleagues have done groundbreaking work in this area. They've shown that psychedelics undercut the integrity of key resting state networks, especially within the default mode network. At the same time, psychedelics increase connectivity between networks that are normally segregated. Other researchers like Lebedev and his team have linked psilocybin-induced ego dissolution to reduced functional connectivity between the medial temporal lobes and higher cortical regions. They've also found disintegration of the salience network during these experiences. In plain terms, the brain regions that usually coordinate your sense of self stop working so tightly together. You become less of a fixed center and more of a flowing process. There's also something called the entropic brain hypothesis. Psychedelics temporarily increase brain signal diversity and flexibility. They loosen rigid patterns that hold identity and habits in place. None of this requires a supernatural explanation. The mystical language people use describes what it feels like when the self-model breaks down. The mechanisms are measurable. They show up as changes in network connectivity and neurochemistry, like shifts in glutamate levels within the default mode network. Mystical framing says, "My soul left my body." Neuroscience framing says, "The usual self network went offline and new network patterns took over." Both are describing the same underlying event from different angles. When people talk about ego death, they often focus on visuals. dragons, fractals, geometric patterns, but the core subjective change is internal. Your brain stops telling a continuous story of me. Experience is no longer centered around a narrator. As default mode network and salience network connectivity drops and cross-network integration rises, the usual boundary between this is my body and that is the world becomes fuzzy. This leads to feelings of unity or oneness. The sense that you and everything around you are the same thing. The medial temporal lobes are involved in stitching memories into a timeline. When they decouple from other systems, people report timelessness. They feel outside time, or they experience past and future without a linear narrative. Emotions still arise, but they feel less mine. They're more like weather passing through awareness. This reflects the loosening of self-referential tagging. Research distinguishes between positively experienced ego dissolution and negatively experienced ego dissolution. The positive version involves merging, peace, awe. The negative version involves dread, loss of self, panic. These different flavors are predicted partly by different glutamate changes in the anterior versus posterior, default mode of network, and hippocampus. In clinical studies, people describe being pure awareness, watching my life from outside, or becoming the room. These descriptions line up with measures of oceanic boundlessness and self-loss. Hallucinations are like the wallpaper. The deep thing happening is that the brain's usual reference point, me, is gone. Everything is perceived without the normal filter of identity and narrative. Trauma confused with identity. Repeated painful experiences crystallized into core self-beliefs. I am broken. I am unsafe. I am unlovable. These beliefs are maintained by self-referential networks and defensive predictions. When ego structures soften under psilocybin, the precision and confidence of those old self-beliefs drop. Traumatic memories can surface in a new emotional context. They're no longer unquestioned truths. Trials of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy for depression show that the quality of the acute experience predicts long-term outcomes. High oceanic boundlessness and low dread of ego dissolution are associated with better results. Newer work finds that stronger mystical type experiences during psilocybin sessions are linked to greater antidepressant effects. This has been shown in treatment-resistant depression and bipolar II samples. Preliminary data suggests psilocybin in group psychotherapy settings may help reduce PTSD symptoms. Participants often report feelings of connectedness, self-compassion, and a recontextualization of trauma. The therapeutic model works like this. With the self less rigidly defended, people can re-encounter painful material while feeling connected, safe, and less identified with their old story. This enables forgiveness, grief, and new meaning-making. Integration sessions after dosing are critical. These are sessions where people talk through their experience and reattach it to their life story. Without integration, a raw ego death episode can become just confusion. With integration, it becomes lasting healing. Depression is consistently linked to overactive or abnormally connected default mode network activity. This contributes to repetitive, self-focused negative thinking. Rumination. The same thoughts looping over and over. Psychedelics like psilocybin reduce within network connectivity in the default mode network. They increase broader cross-network communication. This temporarily interrupts the stuck self-narrative. In clinical trials for treatment-resistant depression, participants often describe relief from feeling trapped in their own minds. They report a sense of mental spaciousness after dosing. Studies show that measures of ego dissolution and mystical type experience predict durable symptom improvements more strongly than dose or simple perceptual effects. How deeply the self loosens matters. One interpretation is that ego death gives you a vivid embodied experience that I am not my thoughts. This breaks the identification that fuels rumination and self-attack. Theoretical work suggests that reduced precision in self-related predictions under psychedelics makes the brain less confident in its old self model. This enables updating. The ego returns. What changes is the flexibility of the self-story and the reduced grip of depressive identities and cognitive loops. The ego's job is prediction and control. It models threats, plans responses, and keeps a coherent sense of I am in here, managing this. Losing that can feel like losing control of reality. Research separates oceanic boundlessness from dread of ego dissolution. Anxiety-laced self-loss predicts worse outcomes. Peaceful self-loss predicts better ones. Neuroimaging shows that anterior default mode network glutamate increases are tied to negatively experienced ego dissolution. Certain neurochemical patterns may underlie panic-style experiences of ego loss. Clinically, participants who resist surrendering to the experience often describe psychological freefall. They fear they're going insane or literally dying. This is why set and setting matter so much. Mindset, preparation, therapeutic support, and environment are treated as core ingredients in modern psychedelic therapy. They're not optional add-ons. Trained guides emphasize trust, acceptance, and curiosity as protective attitudes when the self starts to dissolve. These attitudes help tilt the experience toward insight instead of terror. The same mechanism that can loosen trauma can also shake fragile structures. Careful screening, dosing, and support are used to reduce the risk of destabilizing ego collapse in vulnerable individuals. If a drug can temporarily dissolve your sense of self by altering a few networks, what does that say about how real the self is? Many philosophers and neuroscientists argue that the self is not a thing. It's a process, a pattern the brain generates to organize perception, action, and social life. Thomas Metzinger argues there is no such thing as a metaphysical self. There is only a transparent self model that the brain uses as a control interface. Anil Seth's work on predictive processing frames the self as the brain's best guess about what is happening in the body and world. It's updated constantly through prediction and error correction. Default mode network research supports this process view. The network is most active when we simulate scenarios, recall autobiographical memories, and imagine others' perspectives, all ingredients of narrative identity. Ego death then becomes a temporary failure of the self model to anchor experience. It reveals that awareness can persist without the usual story, like seeing the stage without the main actor. If your personality is just one pattern your brain repeats, how much freedom do you have to change it? And what happens when you glimpse that flexibility directly? Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, brought mainstream attention to psychedelic research. He included stories of ego dissolution and how they reshape identity and reduce fear of death. Stanislav Grof, a founder of transpersonal psychology, documented thousands of non-ordinary states, including LSD sessions. He framed ego death as a gateway to transpersonal experiences. His language is more spiritual than modern network neuroscience. Robin Carhart Harris has led key imaging studies linking psilocybin and LSD to default mode network disintegration, increased global connectivity, and subjective ego dissolution. He helped develop the entropic brain theory. Clinical teams at Johns Hopkins, Imperial College London, and other centers have systematically studied psilocybin's effects on depression, anxiety, addiction, and end-of-life distress. They often note ego dissolution as part of transformative sessions. Newer papers show mystical type experience and ego dissolution scores, predicting longer-term therapeutic gains. This has shifted conversations from "it's just drugs" to "this is a structured psychopharmacology plus psychotherapy model." Meanwhile, online spiritual communities talk about ego death as awakening or enlightenment. They often don't reference brain networks. This creates a gap between mystical discourse and lab data. This video translates between those worlds. It's not dismissing spiritual interpretations. It's grounding them in what we know about resting state networks, prediction, and the brain's construction of self. Longitudinal follow-ups find that participants often rank psychedelic sessions among the most meaningful experiences of their lives. They report lasting changes months later. Common reported shifts include reduced fear of death, increased openness, greater sense of connectedness to others, and decreased rigid attachment to status or ego-driven conflict. Studies suggest that the depth of ego dissolution and mystical type experience predicts long-term improvements in mood and well-being more than sheer intensity of visuals. Imaging and theoretical work propose that the brain rebuilds its self-model after the session, but it rebuilds with updated priors and less rigid precision. This allows more flexible habits and perspectives. Many people describe it like updating the operating system. The self comes back, but certain core assumptions no longer feel as unquestionable. I'm doomed. I'm alone. I must control everything. These beliefs lose their grip. Integration practices help stabilize these new patterns. Journaling, therapy, meditation, and behavioral changes. They help ensure the insight doesn't fade into a cool story, but becomes a lived shift. Ego death is not magic. It's not guaranteed. Some people get no huge revelation. Some struggle afterward. Research is still evolving on who benefits, how often, and under what conditions. Ego death is your brain briefly turning down the system that creates the sense of you. It exposes the fact that yourself is a model, not a fixed soul. Default mode. Network disintegration, salience shifts, and prediction errors become, from the inside, I became everything. I watched myself die, or I was just awareness. Those experiences can permanently soften rigid identities. Psilocybin doesn't give you a new self. It shows that the self is editable. The real work is how you live, heal, and relate after seeing that. If your brain can rewrite who you think you are in a single night, what else might be possible if you consciously rewrite your story over time? Research is ongoing. Safety, legality, and proper therapeutic frameworks matter. Stay curious, not reckless.